Welcome to This Commerce Life. We are an unscripted podcast dedicated to small businesses and entrepreneurs in the retail and consumer packaged goods space in Canada and the United States.
I am Phil Chang, co host and co founder.
And I'm Kenny Vanucci, co host and co founder of This Commerce Life.
Our love is the journey to retail, and our passion is sharing that with you every week.
Hey Phil, hey Kenny.
Nimesh,
How are you? Nice to
on.
meet you. Heard enough about you.
Likewise,
Yeah,
likewise.
some of it pretty good
Congratulations.
too. Not always, but that guy's never, you know the way he is.
Yeah, he looks a little shady, man.
You know what? He does what he dances on that edge, right? Like you're never too sure where he's really going to be at.
I'm not enjoying this podcast already.
Too bad.
I
Good.
think it's very,
That's even
very,
better.
Podcast,
I think
Kenny.
it's a very, very bad idea to put the two of you in the same room.
Yeah, it's
already-
what Seinfeld used to call parallel worlds colliding, man.
It's what happens, man. It's a Seinfeld episode.
Exactly.
I'm unhappy about this choice.
Yeah, you chose it. Don't look at us. We just going for the ride.
Yeah, we're just here, man. Like you said, it was gonna be fun, and I don't have anything to prepare. So
Exactly. He
Oh,
said to
my God.
show up at 10 o'clock. We showed up at 10. Like, what the hell do you want?
yeah.
You know what? I having technical difficulty. Bye.
It's not going to stop us from talking.
Damn it.
Yeah. Hey, do you want me to blur my background?
No.
Okay.
We're an unblurred,
I'm on the couch.
unedited, unrehearsed, we're
Yeah,
you know,
totally on.
we're just an unpodcast is what we are.
Got it.
Totally
Um,
on.
I will do a quick intro. I don't think it's actually going to be quick, but we have Nimesh Jaspal with us, and he's the CEO of Gainops. And Nimesh is going to talk about it some more, but I think what makes this so amazing is Nimesh and we've known each other a really long time. I call it 30 years or so. Nimesh and I went to school together. He's a Canadian that has found the smarter way by hiding himself away in California while the rest of us freeze to death up here. So he's smarter than me already. And then the truth is like what the fuck, man? I've known you like 30 years. Like it's
a long time.
kind of insane.
Actually, over 30 years.
I was doing the
me
math. He
since
said
1990.
school. Yeah, I know how old he is. That you can add a couple more years to the 30.
So it's like at least 34, if not 35 years.
35.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because I guess I wasn't really actually counting school. I was counting after school.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you know,
It's the age
known
part
each
you
other
didn't
a
want to get
very
into.
long time, a very, very long time. But yeah, and I'm excited to have. I mean, so it's weird that Nimesh, someone that I've known like for a very long time, and then Kenny, who really we've not known each other nearly as long, right? Like Kenny and I have really been together like 6 years, right?
6.5 years.
I feel, like 1/6 and 130 plus, but I feel like kindred spirits on the same level, right? Because we've just connected that way. So kind of weird for me, but super excited to have you on. And if I do the intro, is Nimesh is this guy. He was super smart in school. He was super smart out of school. He lives in California and away from the snow, which already makes him really smart. And then if you think about, and then Gainops is this organization that that Nimesh runs that has been really like data focused, right? So they're one of these orgs that not like, don't think of it like Nimesh drowns in spreadsheets or anything like that. It's actually more the opposite. He is that guy that you call when you are drowning in spreadsheets, and he starts to help you figure out like what is on the spreadsheets that you need to pay attention to. What do you need to be thinking about? How does it change your business? Because I think we talk to so many small and medium brands that we talk about the need for data, we talk about the need for insights, but sometimes you get data and you don't know what the fuck to do with it, to be honest, right? And I think Gainops is one of these places that you call where they can start to wrestle your data down and then figure out, what you can draw from it. So that's the most formalized intro I can do, and that feels weird because you are an old friend that to have to do some sort of formal intro. What we'd love to do, what we kind of do on the podcast is to we'd love to hear a bit about your journey, how you got to where you are. We will definitely, both Kenny and I are data heads. We love insights. There isn't anything that gets either of us going more than to go and start picking at data. We're
I like
happiest,
spreadsheets.
yeah, we're happiest parsing data and trying to figure out what is in there, what growth rates are there, what things can we derive. So we'll get there sooner than later as well. But I'm gonna shut up now. Nimesh, journey, tell us, leave me out of it, but all those other things, like where you come from and then how you got to where you are.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Kenny, for having me on the podcast. It's a really interesting, phenomenon for me as well, having known at least Phil for a long time. My journey has been a very interesting one, and I found data by accident, I would say. So I spent 6 years in manufacturing, and some aspects of that was the American Food and Drug Administration. So this is up in Canada. Like, I spent 6 years in manufacturing and I worked throughout school. So not a big deal, but it was very interesting to do that. And now I'd never thought that experience would come in handy, but I actually know what happens on the factory floor and all the way to what happens to the final reporting, when you report at the end of the day, and how do you use those numbers to your benefit. And in between those two bookends, I worked for the government of Ontario. I worked for IBM in marketing. And in the process of leaving IBM, I worked for, I realized data, the power of data. So it took me almost 10, 11 years to figure out that data was where I was good at and something the world wanted to pay on that. And one of the most interesting things was, and which may be relevant to your food and beverage business, is it was very controlled environments. So for example, it was the Food and Drug Administration, all the regulations and everything else, but everything comes to an end with data. And the Gainops is the third iteration of the same problem. Is in the middle, I went and incubated a company that productized the consulting, but what I realized is it was not a problem that could be productized. Some elements of it was, but the data, everybody implements different systems and implements them differently. So the data rules are very different. So that's what I've made my living on, and I built an entire team. And the reason for me to build a team is because data, the universities teach programming. The vendors provide training on their tools, but who teaches data? You just pick it up along the way. And that's where, my expertise is. We picked up along the way. I saw the potential of data, how it goes from end to end. The mistake that you make here is amplified up here in the final reporting. It's known as the butterfly effect sometimes.
Right.
A butterfly, flutters its wings in somewhere in Europe or the Sahara Desert, and it rains in the Amazon. So totally unrelated effects. You may have heard of it as referred to as the gazelle effect as well. Same effect. Gazelles runs and they they kick off the dust and it rains in the Amazon. And there's a whole chain in between. It's the same effect with data. So it's been a very interesting journey.
So, because Phil tries to explain things to me a lot of times and it doesn't necessarily sync. But so, what exactly do you do, Nimesh? I understand you play in the data field, and that's where you came from. But what is it that you actually What do you do, or would I do with you, or what would you do for me?
So, Kenny, easiest way to think about it is technically it's the data, but what I would say, whoop-de-doo.
Right.
What good is the data? So we've focused on revenue. how do
Yeah.
you increase the revenue of an organization and the profitability of the organization, right? If you're in the sell stage, it's the revenue that matters.
Right.
If you plan to keep the company for a long time, it's the profitability of the
Right.
company, right? So we use that data, and the data changes. The issue with data is that it's the whole process, and the business is that the whole process is not in a singular system. So for example, you use a different system for marketing. You use and you may use the same system for a CRM, for your sales, but usually not. Just because the business rules or the rules implemented by the vendor are different. And then you go to an ERP system when that
Right.
person actually becomes a customer. So now you have 3 systems for the whole process. So we harmonize the data across the 3 systems.
Okay,
Or
so you
you know,
pull
for
it into
example.
okay.
And especially if you've grown by acquisition, now you have 6 of those. 6
Yeah,
systems
or more.
or more, right? If you've grown by acquisition, even more. But at the end of the day, Nimesh Jaspal is, regardless of the system you're in, there's only one Nimesh Jaspal. And now I can represent myself under many, many different variations. So it could be N.S. Jaspal.
Yeah.
Is it N. Jaspal? Is it Nimesh J? Or
Right.
is it Nimesh Jaspal? Are they the same people or different people? So you have a lot of attribution on that.
Oh boy.
Are you okay, Kenny?
That did not sound good. Tell me
Well,
more.
no, because because again, it's because most of the most of the stuff I do is in smaller businesses, right? Who don't have the benefit of ERPs, etc. So the data is even that much more interesting to find and to bind together, right?
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I can just see it.
reconciling data is a
Oh my
pain in the
God.
ass,
But then
right?
I can see it like when you get into, especially an acquisition, and depends on how many acquisitions you do, you could have 12, 15 systems because a lot of times they buy, it doesn't mean overnight you migrate systems so the data is in one bucket. Like you can run independent for years. And if you've acquired 2 or 3 people, like you can have multiple independent systems within the company, but now within this greater company. Like, and how do you put all that data into one spot so someone can make a decision to do something, anything?
So, Kenny, that's an excellent question, by the way. Very few companies or people think about that way, but that
You
is
you don't need
reality.
to be kind to him, by the way. Just
You know
because
what? Just
you're my
I'm
friend
liking
and
the match.
he's your
Okay,
friend, and
No, this
it's
is
the
me
friends you
being
keep, right?
me.
So,
Yeah.
Ramesh, you just do you. Don't worry. Don't listen to him. This is a 2-person podcast. Right now, it's just me and you.
So the reality is data is often an afterthought, right? Hey, and the acid test that we often say and use is like it's 12 noon or 1 p.m. on the 31st of December. Would you rather close the deal and get the sale in, or would you rather pay attention to the data? So I often think that data is an afterthought, and we've built systems around that, is to say it's an afterthought. Just fill in the required fields and we do it. So you just need the minimum amount of data, and you'd be surprised, like all the ERP systems, for example, when you're doing an online system for transaction, for example, is you could have the most sophisticated system like an SAP or multiple SAP instances, and SAP is as big as it gets, and I'm just using that as an example. uh, the reality of that is, you just need one field, which is the quantity of the inventory that you have to get your online system working. The rest doesn't matter, right? And inherent in that is the understanding that, hey, your online system and your ERP system has the same product information,
Right.
right? But once that is done, you only need one field. And by the way, to your spreadsheet comment, the largest companies still use spreadsheets.
Yeah.
For example, Amazon, which is the biggest retail company that you can get, they have such unique processes that an ERP system, they couldn't be codified. It couldn't be codified as a standard system. So they ran on, and they still do, they run on spreadsheets. I hope that answers, gives you a glimpse into the world that we deal with, but it's a lot of it is spreadsheets and some of it is organized systems and data.
Wow, the fact it's still running
I
on
just,
spreadsheets that we
I,
live in, which we know is really not the way to do it. But
Well, but that's reality, Kenny.
I know.
That is business reality. Like, would you rather implement a system that does implicates like in its own business rules, you have a rigor, and now your business processes change,
Yeah.
right? Like, how do you do your quota systems? You don't do that in organized systems. Most companies don't. You do it in an Excel spreadsheet. So
Yeah.
we just bring that in. Like, hey, how are you measuring against quota?
like I think about,
Hmm.
Kenny, you think about like all of the things, when we go through the planning process with customers, like all these sort of things, and like the thinking work that you need to do, but in ratio of things that need to get done, like 80% of your work isn't thinking, 80% is compiling, normalizing, trying to figure out, do I have the right number in here? Did it calculate right? Did I screw up a formula somewhere else that's dependent on this to be able to get to a spot? And then, 8 days of that goes by, and then you've got 20% of your time actually focused on, like, okay, let's put some colors in here and see like what comes up green, what comes up red, what comes
Right.
up yellow, what am I alarmed at, what am I not alarmed at, what does it mean to tell me, right? And I think that's the part when I was talking to Nimesh that made me really intrigued, because that's why I said you've got to come on, right? Because there are people, we know for a fact there are people, in businesses in this cohort that listen to us, that's what they're doing, is they're spending like 1,000,000 hours throwing spreadsheets together. Only maybe sometimes you realize, fuck, I did it all wrong, right? Like I my source sheets, I pulled the wrong assumption, or I got the wrong data on the wrong axes. you know if you're sort of Excel skilled, like I'm pretty Excel skilled, so I could go back and figure out, how do I undo my mistake so I can rearrange axes and things like that. Most people wouldn't. They would just wipe it out and start again. And so by the time you're done, you're going, well, fuck if I know. Like I could sit here and look at these damn spreadsheets all day, or I could go out and just do something and see if it see if it works, right? So, to me, it was interesting, because I don't know if I've got that right, Nimesh, so you'll have to tell me, but I feel like the thing that you do just helps me get to the thinking bits faster. Do you know, Kenny? Like, so
And
I'm
Nimesh, I
no, I'm
think
not I'm not
what he's
fucking
trying to
around
do,
with,
he knows that's my world,
yeah,
even more so than his in a lot of ways. Because I have
yeah,
2 companies, and I shit you not, I spend more time in spreadsheets because none of these small companies, nothing's integrated, right? So nothing talks to each other.
yeah.
Payables don't talk to receivables, sales doesn't talk to marketing, nothing talks to anything. And then there's accounting over there. Like, it's just a fucking shit show. And
So,
data
Kenny,
is
just so that
everywhere.
the largest semiconductor company, one of the largest, I should say, in the top 5, international company at that,
Yeah.
had 4 systems, 2 ERP systems and 2 CRM systems that didn't talk to each other. How do you
That
do the
seems
product
insanity.
company in there? How
Yeah.
do you get it out of the door? How do you get credit? Their biggest issue was, if they didn't claim credit for that sale, they wouldn't get it. Now
Exactly.
you reduce that to the smaller issues, like, okay, and what Phil was talking about is like, hey, instead of business focusing on the business, you're now focused on getting the spreadsheet right.
Well, and I think that's where he knows my frustrations is I spend a lot of time there. Where I'd rather be is I don't want to spend the time in the building of the spreadsheet. I like when I'm finally to the point where I think I'm clean, and think is a key word, is I just like looking at the data now. What is this actually telling me? Or what
Yeah.
story am I going to glean
Yeah.
from this? Or what story do I want to make up? Because there's times, numbers are numbers. They tell you a story, but I can spin a story and I can spin a number. The problem we have a lot of times is I don't know if those numbers are accurate because I spend so much fucking time in the spreadsheet trying to figure out what the hell I'm trying to do. But it's by the time I get to the end date, I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, I hope I did that right. Because otherwise I just got bad data.
You could do it all right, right? But here's another challenge that we've often see in our meetings. You come up with a number, and then Phil comes up with a number.
I know.
Whose number is correct?
No, it's
Seriously?
fine.
Well, it's
And
gonna
now
be
there's a
mine.
difference.
I'm
I
mine.
spent
It's
more
mine.
time in the
'Cause I'm
spreadsheet.
Asian, so I definitely know the number better than Kenny. So it's
So
definitely
instead
mine.
of moving the business forward, now
Wow.
you're spending more time talking about whose number is correct, whose
Well,
spreadsheet is
but
correct.
you know that is what happens. That is sort of the real life. What's worse, Nimesh, is when two people come up with the number, but there's three numbers.
Yeah, yes.
That's the fun one. Because then you're looking, thinking, wow, okay, that's a good one. Like, where'd the other one come from?
Exactly.
But even the, I mean, you get there, and even the interpretation of what goes in the number, like all that shit that.
But that's arguments all the time. Like finance will do that. Like they'll put
Yeah.
numbers in that you're in sales will say, but that's not my number. I
Yeah.
don't want it in mine. And marketing will do the same, or someone else will say, well, yeah, I know, but you're screwing my number now.
Well,
Can
and
you
then
read
you're
the
talking
rest of
about 1
that?
month, right? Like we got to do this 12 times in the year.
I was just about to say,
Yeah.
Phil, I think you and I had a Vulcan mind meld. It's like Groundhog Day. It's like, like clockwork, whenever you're doing your planning, whenever you're doing your budgeting, whenever you're doing your board reporting, it's a thankless job.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
like, instead of moving and I get stuck on like, hey, let's move the business forward.
Right.
It's a thankless job. Like just get it done. Outsource it if you have to. It's an independent third party, and that's our biggest economic reason of why we exist. Is like we're an independent third party that gives you a consistent set of data across multiple spreadsheets, across multiple systems. It doesn't matter to us.
Right.
We all
What
understand data.
what size of companies are you typically working with though? Like what is sort of I'm gonna lack of like what's the magic number? Like when would somebody be knocking at the door and saying, listen, I'm at a size, or I don't know, whatever that means. Maybe it's a small company, maybe it's large, but like what's sort of your, I don't know, spot?
Let me take that on, right? Let me answer you slightly differently. Every
Sure.
large company, right? So we work across the whole gamut, like, from a solopreneur to a large company. And I
Okay.
mean an international company, international top 5, Fortune 5, if you will.
Yeah.
They all have the same problem. Because the issue is that regardless of the size of the company, they all started as a single idea or as a single team.
Right.
Team being no more than 1 or 2 or 3 people.
Right.
Right? That's the founding team. Like, you have more than 3 people, it doesn't go anywhere. Like you don't have to take my word for it, but you can actually research this. Like, what's the size of the founding team? Apple, for example, the biggest retail name in retail, started with 3 people, down to 2, right? And now down to professional management. It doesn't matter. They have the same system. The advantage of getting your data numbers right is like it allows you to move your business forward.
Right.
Right. That's what the issue. That's what the focus really should be, not on the data.
Right.
What's okay, so
Sorry, Phil, just to answer Kenny's question, because I don't think I did that very succinctly, is the time to engage with us, right? Where we find the most success is when you can no longer run the business in your head, and you now need to communicate to the second person.
Right.
I was going to ask you that actually, because I think that's important. So let's take that one more step. Is I can't manage it in my head. I need help. So what do you like? What does it look like? Like, are you, because I think if I'm a founder, I'm struggling with all the things rattling around in my head. I'm struggling with manufacturing. I'm worried about the numbers. I got to get numbers out. If I bring you in, are you now going to give me another system I've got to worry about? Like, what is that? How do you figure out what I have? And then how do you figure out how to help someone like
how do you uncomplicate sort of me as well? It's sort of that same thing. Like, do I just now have another thing to worry about?
The minute you engage with another company or another thing, and it's nothing to do with Gainops or with me or my company, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the minute you engage with it, you've introduced some complexity into the system. So we being cognizant of that, recognizing that, we've actually made it very simple. And the simplicity of that is we don't have any software to implement, right? We can work with your software, whatever you have on-prem or in the cloud, it doesn't matter. We take the data from there, clean it up, we can give it back to you, or we have the rules that we implement with every time we get the data. Some people, it was a Canadian manufacturing company, actually, that gave us the data as a dump every night. We turned around and, the COO, the CEO of the firm basically said, wow, it doesn't matter what systems he has. He just looked at the dashboard of the customer 360. Hey, what is my status of the customer? Because the reality is you cannot sell to a customer if they have like 5 open key issues with your product.
Right.
So, no point hiring a salesperson and spending money and, having them to look, just having them because you have them, and you can brag to your friends to say like, oh, I have, a sales team, but they're not producing numbers for you because, hey, the customers will not buy if they have issues. And so how do you find all that information? Either you log into 5 or 10 different systems or 15 different systems, or you get it all into the same picture, into the same pane of glass, if you will, or the same dashboard.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
No, it makes total sense.
Yeah. And it's kind of awesome, right? Because then you really do, you start skipping. I'm laughing because Kenny and I worked as fractionals for a company, and I think the first, actually, like today is March 1st, right? So on the 1st and the 2nd, that's what we'd be asking for, and we'd have to ask for it every month, right? Is, hi, do you have numbers? Like, can you pull stuff down? Can you please, we need these. And then Kenny would go, well, I have this one, I have that one. Do you have, wait, don't do that one. I did that one, and then the two of us would start putting this thing together. And like 3 days in, you go, hang on a second, like this doesn't look anything like what we did last month, right? And you go, fuck, right? Like, but I'm trying to tell a consistent story. Like, oh, now I got to go figure out, open that grid and see how did I create that chart so I can replicate the chart and show the growth that comes out of, like all these things that I feel like you just covered, by being kind of that steady presence on board.
Yeah,
And
that's really what I'm feeling.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I'm just reading.
He wants to give you a hug.
Exactly what? Yeah.
I'll give you guys a virtual hug, man.
Oh my God. As it's March 1, so guess what we're doing today?
Okay, what?
Data dumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I was about to ask a rhetorical question, and no answer is required. Is, when you were hired as fractionals and you spent 3 days working with the data, was the company like, were you just working with the data or moving the business forward? And I would suspect that you were just working with the data versus having the data ready to go.
That's right.
But that's just it. It's not 3 days. By the time you really get into the analysis of the data, which is what you should be doing to try to figure out where you're going backwards and how to stop that or move it forward or whatever you're trying to do, you're day 15 and now you're already worried about the next month's data.
Yep.
Which is even the worst story, because you're really, what we started with, 80% of the time is in data collection, data amalgamation, data cleansing, and then 20% of the time, and it's the wrong ratio.
Actually, I would push back even on the 20%. I think it's roughly about 5 to 7.
Okay, I was trying to be friendly. I mean, it's probably even less than that. That's the saddest part. And seriously, it's 2024, and we're talking about we got so much automation on this planet, and we're spending so little time on the important part, which is looking at it and say, okay, what is this telling me, and how do I go forward based on what I'm seeing? Not how long is it going to take me to get this to the point where I can talk about what we just sort of talked about.
Yep.
And I can't spend 95% of my time just collecting, amalgamating, and cleaning, and only 5% on the time in using it. There's no sense to this.
Exactly that, right? And people have different definitions as well. Like, if you ask,
Oh, God.
who a customer is, for example, right? So having strategic conversations with the team, and it doesn't have to be frequent, it doesn't have to be long, but, an hour to 4 hours, Zoom or in person, it doesn't matter,
Right.
right? Getting the right definitions of things is really important to further that business.
Well, it's even the speed of it too, Nimesh, like we were saying, is, if on the 1st, it's already too late to look at the last 29 days of the month I just ended. Because you know why? It's all rear view mirror. It's past.
Yep.
I've already passed that town. I mean, I'm not going back to go to the cafe that's 30 miles behind me. It's too late. So how do I look ahead? But if I'm now spending the next 2 weeks still looking in the past to get it up to date, by the time I start looking ahead, I'm now 6 weeks from the starting point.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. No, exactly that, Kenny. And let me talk about, when companies look at numbers, they may not be looking at the complete set of numbers.
Oh, that's definitive. Are you kidding me? Oh my God.
No, come on, man. That's just crazy talk. What are you talking
easy
about?
there.
Everybody
Come on.
looks at the complete.
No, Phil, let me talk about, for example, CAC, right? Cost of customer acquisition, right?
Yeah.
Or customer acquisition cost is CAC.
Yeah.
Right. People look at a CAC number and they're just really happy. But what they should really be looking at is not only CAC by itself, but they should be looking at what is the payback period for that customer.
Right.
And it needs to be at the individual customer number, right? The metric, because it may cost like $5 to acquire me. And it may take like, $7 to acquire somebody else. And I'm just using very small numbers.
Right.
Right. And for example, one of the companies that we work with, and they did the S in the HTTPS in your browser, they realized that, their numbers were off. Their numbers were off. They were actually not being profitable.
Again, but when you look at one number in isolation, your CAC might be $5 to your point, the other 7, but the 7 might be a better one to have.
Exactly.
It might cost me more to get, but you're way more profitable. Again, you're not looking at the full picture. And that's our problem, is you get snippets. And what you're praying to God is the snippet you're looking at is the one that's going to move the needle in the right direction. And a lot of times we spend that, because on your example, you know what the first thing you do? Well, 5 is the better number. We should just go
On
after
the
the
face of
5.
it, you're right on, but the payback is like, $3 and I'm out. You've actually
Exactly,
lost
but
$2
all
on
I
me.
saw was the 5. 5
Yeah.
better than 7. It's cheaper. That's the guy.
But the guy you spend $7 on, like the payback is going to be like $200.
Exactly.
But
Versus
you
you
need
lost
2
money
data
on the
points
$5
now.
guy.
I think
Yeah,
the
but I
other,
need the 2 data points. I need both.
Yeah.
well, you need more than that. And I
Well,
think
that
part
on
of,
this example per se, right? But
yeah,
you're right. It's just amalgamating all of them. Say, okay, give me the greater, broader
Yeah.
picture. Like, what
Yeah.
is this?
yeah.
Yep.
But I also think, and I think where Nimesh, like I'm curious is when you get, because we have a lot of young founders. We have some. It's funny because we kind of have a kitty of like 6 or 7 episodes, and so just before we recorded with someone who is going through another fundraise, right? So he's going through another round of fundraising. He's in the beverage industry and just doing some like crazy groundbreaking things, right? But you think in those cases, the things that he's going through, he's overcome like some serious, manufacturing, like all these sort of things to kind of get to where he is. But, now he's got investors and people like that going, what's going on over there? Are you making money? And like, if I apply just the CAC conversation, the cost of acquisition, there's a flip side, right? Is if I'm worried about just that single metric, I haven't thought about all the other things that might come into play that may or may not tell me if I'm viable in the future. Right?
You're right on. Is
Yeah.
like, hey, the reason I started consulting in this area, right, and going back historically, is a company I used to work for, and it's a documented case. right? The company I used to work for, they went through a bankruptcy proceeding, through a court proceeding. So it's an open document.
Wow.
And the analysis of their accounting firm, the audit accounting firm for the court, was that this company was losing money every time they built or they sold something. But that number was obfuscated by the revenue number.
Right.
Was hidden by the revenue number. Like, hey, the money's coming in. Like, how could I go bankrupt? That's like saying, hey, how could I run out of money in my bank account when I still have checks?
But that's how most companies will run.
Yep.
It's bank account balance.
Yes.
And it's only a problem when it gets to zero. And then someone says, but we're doing 50 million in sales. It's impossible that we cannot be making money. And you're thinking, well, yeah, if you're doing 55 million in expenses, it's very clear how you can't make money on 50 million. It's not rocket science, guys.
Yeah. And, Phil, you said something very interesting about raising money and everything else. Like, whether that is your first round or your subsequent rounds.
Yeah.
There's only one thing that the investors are curious about, and this is apart from, hey, I just like you, I'll give you money and I'll bet on you. Past that stage, it's like,
wait, sorry, do you know investors that would do that? Because I got a product to sell. If you have investors that are like,
and I'm pretty likable. Like, I could be likable if I have to be. So if that's all it's going
because
to
there's
take,
a whole other revenue stream to match that we could set up for you here. If that's anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I have some sand to sell you in Arizona, man.
It's all good. It's
You
nice
need to
sand.
bomb California out of the way.
Oh my God. Okay, sorry. Please continue.
So no, exactly right. So the question of, and you can only pay out of profitability, right? Because raising money is raising money. You can raise more money, and then it's a Ponzi scheme, right? It's an inverse pyramid. You're just raising more money to pay the previous round of people, but that's illegal, if you will. At least in the US, it is illegal. And in Canada, I think it is illegal still.
It's illegal everywhere. It's immoral. Like, you're not doing it. You're not helping anybody. It's just wrong.
Right. So the only way to pay an investor back is through your profits.
Yeah.
Right?
Not rocket science.
It's not rocket science from that perspective, but your profitability is at question.
Yeah.
What are your margins, if you will? And that's where the CAC and the payback period comes in really handy.
Yeah, it's I like this because I think it's something that our listeners, we've come a long way. We've got founders that started from nothing. They've all got amazing businesses, but you think this year of all years, right? Like, investors they're nervous, right? Because there's a lot of businesses in trouble, and so if I'm a shareholder, or an investor, I'm calling, right? Like, what do I do? Do I call every week? Do I call every month? Do I find out what you're doing? Like, but if you play that forward now, if I was blowing off, board meetings every quarter or something like that, because before money was okay.
Well, money was also cheap.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. But now it's not so cheap, right? And so I need to know if I have more risk. So I just feel like being organized in your conversations with these folks is helpful.
Organized, and you have to have a story to tell.
Yeah.
Regardless who builds the story, and that story is based on the actual numbers.
Yeah.
Because you could have an opinion. I could have an opinion. A third person could have an opinion. But the reality of that is, what do the data tell us?
Yeah. And we always say that, Nimesh. Numbers tell the story. Your feelings are good, and I love the fact that you feel something, and that's really important, but it doesn't do shit for my business. The numbers will tell me what I should be feeling.
He doesn't care what you feel, by the way. He really doesn't.
It's so untrue. So untrue.
Kenny, I have a great story for you.
If it's about Phil, even better.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a franchise business out of Toronto. The head office is out of Toronto. It's a publicly listed company. And we did some work with them. And just as it was almost like, okay, whatever. What are you going to tell me? I'm the CEO. I've been a CFO, of the company. I have I have a chartered accountant degree. I know my numbers really well, inside out. So I said, and the CEO's name is Jeff. And, I said, Jeff, just out of curiosity, what business are you in? And he said, hey, I'm in the subscription business. It's like $99 per month. Even in the downturns, we don't worry about that.
Right.
When we looked at the data, right, what we realized is that they'd actually acquired a lot of customers along the way that were over 500,000, over $1 million in revenue, just by the dint of the business that they were in. And they were no longer a $99 per month subscription fact. And what we also realized is like they had scheduled, and they were in the truck-based business, by the way, delivery business, right?
Yeah.
So they realized is that, hey, and what Jeff said to me is like, it doesn't cost him anything extra to pick up my stuff on an on-call basis. I think the idea was really good when they first started out, but they were doing a lot of on-call unscheduled calls that they're running the truck up and down for.
Yes, that's different than just picking up on the way.
Just versus picking up on the way. And we would not have, there was no way this guy would have ever figured out unless he was, responsible for that specific number or that dashboard. So in the end, what he did, or what I think they did, is that they changed the compensation business, the compensation systems or the methodology of how they enhanced their sales reps. So instead of thinking every sales rep as a $99 a month system and now they just need to buy more, is they changed it to say, hey, let's look at the value of the business that you bring in. And they divided their sales team into two. People who just brought in the $99 a month business, and people who are going after large accounts like the insurance companies, like the healthcare systems, and so on.
Right.
So that's an example of what the insight gets you. It gets you to think about your business. There's a gap between what you think is happening in the field and what is actually happening in the field. It's identifying that gap and orienting the team towards that. That's that's the work that you do as a leader, but you need some help with that. Your strategy
that's
will
where
be good
data
with
comes into
numbers.
play. Obviously, that's what the numbers will tell you. Again, it's always the same thing. It's feelings versus facts.
Exactly, right on.
It's not, again, it's nothing that complicated. The challenge that most of us have is getting to the facts. So what ends up happening, you just run on feelings because you can't find the facts.
There's almost just not enough time to go get facts.
I think you're right, Phil, because by the 15th of the month that you're in, talking about the month that you passed, really
doesn't move the ball.
Well, well, if anything, it could move it. It moves in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
Or unless you get lucky, and most people seem to just get a little luck for a while, and things happen, so they just continue on and not realizing that. Listen, you had a few horseshoes. There might have been things that you really weren't in your control, benefited you, and that's great. But long term,
Kenny, there's another issue that comes to my mind, right? One of the leading reasons why people actually don't want somebody to look at their data is it feels like that they're hiding something, right? Not that they are, or they may not be, but it feels like they're hiding something, right? And the fact that they are going to be somebody like who's going to be either putting a spotlight on them, or a flashlight on them, like very focused to say like, hey, explain these numbers to me, is very uncomfortable for them. And that is the leading reason why some of the people don't do business with us.
I can totally see that, though, because we've been around enough companies where, and it typically starts running uphill, where you get upper management or people that, let's say, should know, because really you should know, but don't know. And the thing is, when you start digging and asking questions, it's very uncomfortable because you're questioning them in essence, or the feeling will be that, which is, and it's a feeling that's valid because we are questioning you. But it doesn't have to be, we're not the Gestapo here. It's not about, some regime that we're all going to shoot everybody who disagrees with. We're trying to just get to the facts. And if you don't know, you don't know. That's fine.
Right.
Let's
And
all get to how we do know, and then we can all move forward.
And Kenny, it also changes the conversation, right? Instead of saying like, so before somebody has a dashboard or a sales leaderboard or a quote to cash cycle,
Sure.
depending upon which area of the company you want to focus on first, is like, instead of saying like, oh, I think you could do this better, right? That's a think. I think that's a feeling.
It's a feeling.
Versus to say like, hey, they look at the data, they look at the dashboard and say, explain these numbers to me, right? It changes the exec's conversation. Instead of being very confrontational, like, it's hey, you could be wrong, and somebody like, how can you argue with if you've sold $5 worth of business in the month? How can you sell with that? Like, oh, I have a lot of pipeline. Hey, let's look at the pipeline of sales now.
Yeah.
Right?
And let's keep validating what
Yeah.
we think. And you may find that, yeah, you're spot on. And now we've got some good discussion of how to make it maybe $6 instead of the 5 or whatever the number is. Or you might find out that your feelings are just that, they're feelings. The facts don't support or substantiate the feelings. The feelings are great, but who cares?
Yeah,
I don't care
exactly.
how you feel necessarily, right? At this point, tell me what really is happening. Let's get going.
And the other thing that we often find is the discounting behavior of a salesperson. So the way I would say that is, and Brian Tracy said, nothing happens till a sale is made, right? Because when a sale is made, it's like your revenue coming in.
Exactly.
And so I really like salespeople, but the conversations are different at the beginning of the period versus towards the end of the period.
Yes.
Right? Hey, let's get the revenue in. Like, if whether that's profitable or not, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's a revenue number we're shooting for.
Exactly. It's a revenue. And what we've realized is that, the discounting behavior of some of the reps is really, really bad for the company's profit.
Right. But that's a company problem, because you know what you told the rep to do? Exactly what the rep's doing.
Exactly.
Get me revenue. You didn't say get me profitable revenue. You just said get me revenue.
Yeah.
So if you want revenue, I'll get you revenue. I didn't say we were going to make any money, but I'll get you the revenue. Right? You keep trying to tell
the company lost money, and you're right on.
Doesn't matter. That's not what you asked me. You said get me revenue. I got you revenue.
And you didn't say profitable, and what margins, by the way.
Exactly. But again, people just don't get down those paths where you got to remember that, yeah, I mean, the whole function of the business is that spread between COGS and revenues of the world you live in. You don't bank sales. I wish we could. We don't.
And like a really concrete example, we for one of the companies I work for, we ran Black Friday last year. I wasn't around, but they ran a Black Friday sale, and they picked up a whole bunch of new users, bought in at, kind of buy two, get one, right? So pretty common, increased consumption, market basket, blah, 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 right? But then, so this year we said, oh, let's run it again. But when we looked at something complicated but simple in lifetime value, you went like, because in the other metrics that we talked about, like cost of acquisition, you're kind of like, okay, so well, if you buy two and you get one free, the cost of acquisition is the free, right? So we gave away one, so they could, they bought two and they gave away one.
That's a high cost of acquisition. You're right.
But when we look at lifetime value, none of these folks stuck around. They took the 2 for 1 and then never bought again. No. Right? So all of a sudden you go, well, lifetime value is shit on this item, right? So yes, I drove consumption. So there's a temporary temporal effect to doing what I did. And as long as we're all okay with that, we're all okay with that, right? But then we came back this year and went, hey, that worked really well for it. Actually, it didn't, right? Like we didn't actually bring anyone that stayed. So do we want this or not, right? Like, but again, without the data, I on that note, I actually
fault the customer for that, right? Because you offered them a deal and they took the deal.
Yeah. And they should take the deal. And if they don't want it, and all customer maybe has done, I'll just wait for the next deal.
Yeah.
But even in that case, the salesperson is not at fault, right? Because they're like, you said to sell, so I'm fucking selling, sold, right? So I sold it. So if you guys thought it wasn't going to be profitable, you should have told me, don't do that. That's a terrible deal, right? But you didn't say that, so I just kept selling it, right? Like that's what they're supposed to do, right? Like
And Phil, like I'm just using that as an example and using some more examples
Yeah.
on top of that. Let's say your profitability was 40%, right? Uh, for example, just as an example, 40% profit. Well, you gave away 33% because it was buy two get one free.
Right.
So 33% right off. The 33% came off the 40. Plus, you compensated the salesperson.
100%. Some have got paid to do that.
Yeah, and some of them are paid to do that, right? Or the cost of the marketing system, the program, and all of that. By the time you look at that, it was a very unprofitable business.
Right. Now, for those who are doing that, if that's because you need to blow inventory, you want to turn inventory into cash, and you've got a small bubble that you really have to do something, it may be the right decision.
Right.
But again, the data will tell you that.
Exactly.
You look at it and say, okay, I needed to blow inventory. Guys, you know what? In an everyday situation, we'll never do this again. Thank God we did that, because we turned a lot of nothing into cash, which we needed. No problem. I get it. Yay team.
Yep.
Light her up.
Kenny, by the way, I'm buying you beer or your favorite drink or tea or coffee next time up in Toronto, which is in April.
No, he's Vancouver.
I like the beer.
He's on your side of the world.
I'm in Vancouver.
He's in Vancouver.
I'm in
Perfect.
East
And
Van.
that's a short hop away.
Where are you?
I'm in San Francisco.
Oh, you're San Francisco. So if you come up this area, well, if you come up in April, like he's here in April.
Yeah, and I do the gross grind next time. Like I promised myself that next time I was in Vancouver, I would do the gross grind.
Okay, well, I'll meet you at the bottom or the top.
I'll take I didn't say I was gonna. You can take.
Well, you're gonna look at it from the tram. Oh, okay. I'll be on the same grind you're on then.
Yeah.
I think to get away from the two of you, I'll do the
meet you at the bottom.
But yeah, I'll just do the climb. I'm good with it. So yeah.
I took my mom on a helicopter ride up there, man.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, if on a clear day, wow.
Yeah, it was a clear day.
It's a wow. It's spectacular.
Yeah, and I mean to do the helicopter ride in the Vancouver area as well.
Yeah, it's God's country. It really is.
It is.
Nimesh, we're almost out of time. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
If people want to find you, where do they find you?
So the best way to do that is to send me an email. They could call me, but an email is the best. And my email address is Jaspal, Jaspal @gainops.com. That is Jaspal @gainops.com.
Okay.
That's the best way to do that. If somebody wants to call me and to avoid it just going into voicemail or so, the best way to do.
Don't leave your phone number.
Okay.
Don't leave your phone number. Yeah.
It's an email.
Or go to the website
there because
put the website link down below to www.gainops.com. So yeah.
Perfect.
Put it down below.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Ken.
No, it was my pleasure. It was very nice meeting you finally. I've heard enough about you, so it was very nice to finally name and face.
Likewise. And by the way, so not for public distribution, but dude, you owe me a beer as well for stealing Phil.
No.
Yeah.
I never said sharesies. That's your problem. I always tell people everybody should have a Phil in their arsenal, but not my Phil. Get your own Phil. I don't care if you knew him longer either. Too bad.
Let me change that. And Phil would say everybody should have a Kenny on their arsenal, but not my Kenny.
Not likely, but that's okay. I'm okay with that, Nimesh. I know my limitations in life, and I'm good with it. Nobody gets my Phil. Get your own.
You are a good man, Kenny.
You guys are crazy. Get off this call, both of you. Damn it.
Yeah, whatever.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you,
Guys,
guys.
it was nice meeting you. Seriously, hopefully we catch up. If you come up to the city, do let me know, and we'll catch a beer on Commercial Drive or something. It'd be awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, seriously.
Look forward to it.
Awesome,
Okay.
bud.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Phil, thank you, Kenny. Bye.
Take care. Phil, hang on. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Interesting,
right?
You know what it is? It's such okay. Just so people are still listening, fuck, I hate doing this type of podcast on the first of the month, because you know what I'm going to do when we hang up?
Yeah, because you're anxious about everything.
All I've got is this anxiety building in me right now that I've got two companies that the whole rest of the day is going to be spreadsheet. So
yeah.
which I'm okay with, because once they're done, then I like to dig in and say, okay, what's going on? How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
But it's just like data crunching, man.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing like it, I mean, I wish we on both companies we were at a size where we could probably. Well, we probably are, but probably the amount of time I spend, we could probably get someone else to do it, and just I'd rather spend more time in just the straight analysis.
So even like this will make it into the recording, but as a fractional, I'm actually going to try and figure out if there's a way that the next time I go to a company, I just bring Nimesh along, right? Because then there's lots of arguments to be had where you start thinking about this in a different way, where you go, look at, maybe I'll work with whatever infrastructure you have, but I got to bring this guy because he's going to help me with the first 6 reports that I need to be able to show you guys that in fact I've got, that I'm, because the pressure on fractionals is as soon as I start working, I got to figure out how to
well, you got to do what we're doing.
I got to show some return, right? Like I got to show that I'm doing the right thing. And so this is kind of like one of those things, right? So
no, totally agree with you.
Listen, we got to go. We got.
Oh my God, we have 2 minutes. Go back. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Okay. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.